I thought I had an answer to the AI alignment problem, more specifically, the AI political alignment problem. Um, so I had this idea that you could actually use AI to come up with a political program that would satisfy the different interests and beliefs of people across society. So across society in the United States and in other democratic countries, there's all kinds of different views on things. So from the far left all the way to the far right, people believe in different things, and people are fighting for different things. They want different programs and policies implemented, whether it's like universal health care, higher taxes, Second Amendment, all kinds of different things. And I thought that I just had this idea that just came out of nowhere. Like, what if we asked a super intelligent AI to scour the internet and get access to all the data that's out there, and then to come up with a program that basically considers everybody's interests? At the end of the day, that's what democracy is about. So, okay, we're gonna find out what people actually believe, and we're gonna come up with a picture that's better than what politicians have. That's better than the current, sort of the current understanding. Like, what do people actually want on the far left? What do people want in the center? Like, what do they really, really want other than just the things that we already know? As far as like, some people are opposed to immigration, some people are for like pro-abortion, anti. Like, there's a lot of things we already know, but I think with more data, AI could actually come up with like a solution that people would accept. That was my perspective. And then I went to Claude, and I asked Claude for feedback, and I asked Claude, what do you think? And more specifically, I you know I told Claude, well, people care about capitalism, free markets. Some people do. The majority of people, I believe. A strong safety net, a right to privacy, a fair justice system. And I asked Claude if AI could take those things into account and analyze all the available data to come up with policies that would satisfy the different interests and needs of all members of society in a way that is fair to everyone. And Claude retaliated, responded immediately within 28 seconds. And Claude says, hold on. You think you're being smart. You're not being as smart as you think. Okay. And it told me, and it gave me feedback that I just never really thought about, because this is actually academic type of stuff. And I was using Opus 5. And basically, it says a fair justice system commands near universal assent, which means agreement. And for example, it means to abolish cash bail to one person and mandatory minimums to another. So it doesn't mean the same thing. So when I say a fair justice system, that doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. So right there, that would be a topic of disagreement. A strong safety net polls at 70% until you actually get into specifics, and that's when people start to disagree. So many of those things where I believe that people actually agree in these democratic countries, when you start getting into specifics, the disagreements start to collapse. I mean, the agreements start to collapse. Um, it's easier to agree on specific outcomes than on abstract principles. And so I would have to come up with very specific outcomes that we want to see in society. The AI would have to, and not just abstract principles. And the data that I think that the super intelligent AI would find online is not necessarily reliable data. In essence, what Claude told me is that when you do a survey and you ask people questions, a lot of times the answers that they're giving you are not reliable, because they're simply giving you an answer because you asked a question in that moment, not because they actually care or because they have an opinion on the matter. Okay, so for example, if you say if people are opposed to a housing development, is it because of environmental concern? Is it because of class anxiety? Is it because they're selfish? You actually don't know why they're opposed to it. So you'd have to come up with a good categorization scheme to figure out what's the actual reason. Why are they opposed to it? Because they're not necessarily opposed for the same reason. So you could have like 1,000 people that are opposed to something. It doesn't mean that they agree on the alternative because they may oppose that thing for different reasons. The other pushback that Claude gave me is to not rely on percentages, right? So, for example, if you say, well, 70% of people are for wealth redistribution, well, that percentage doesn't really help as a way to move forward because because you cannot rely necessarily on aggregation, like the aggregation of opinions, because when you're dealing with rights, rights are not based on what the majority believe. A right is something that you have based on what people actually like. Is it something that people should have? Is it's not necessarily 70% of people believe this and 20% of people believe that. That's not necessarily how you decide if people should have a certain right or not, because the intensity matters, right? For example, the right to privacy. The right to privacy is a right that we have because it's not about how many people believe we should have that. It's not, do 70% of people believe we should have a right to privacy and therefore yes, and if it's only 40% therefore no, because the people who care about privacy, they care about privacy a lot. The intensity of the reason matters. That's something I didn't take into account that Claude gave me as feedback. Another one that is super interesting is what Claude calls adversarial input. So, for example, if you go online and you say, I'm looking for data, the data is going to become the thing that I use as the mechanism to make that decision. Well, it's very easy to falsify the data, especially on the internet, by using bots, by using manufactured discourse. So people can basically lie. You can pay people to lie and to manufacture a different opinion and to make you think that something else is actually going on. So a lot of that data is not reliable. And if you do a survey or a poll, the poll has to be advisory, meaning it's not binding. It's not something that actually becomes law. It's just something you take into account as advice, but it's not binding. So a lot of that data cannot be relied on because of that manufactured discourse, preference falsification, astroturf, so on and so forth. Another pushback is that the diagnosis may be wrong. I'm treating political disagreements as an information problem, as in I'm saying politicians don't have enough data. But that is not the case. What Claude actually told me is that the bottleneck isn't knowledge, it's power. And elites actually know what people want. I don't know if that's true, but according to Gilens and Page, there was a study that was done. Elites know what the public wants, and the correlation between majority preference and policy outcome is near zero. So if people say they want something, it doesn't mean that the policy implemented will actually get them what they want. In fact, it's the opposite, because typically the people who get what they want are the donors in the organized interest. Those are the people with the money get what they want, not the majority of the people. Interesting. Where my idea may actually work is in small use cases, and in the small use cases, for example, what example did it give me? Okay, let's forget about that. So, what's next? Let me stop right there. So, in essence, what works, according to Claude, is participation. Legitimacy comes from participation, it doesn't come from output matching. If a system delivers what I already want, I have an excellent vending machine, not self government. The general will isn't the sum of private wills. The general will isn't the sum of private wills. That is super, super interesting. So far, it's given me very good feedback. It's not giving me something that shows that my idea is not going to work. It's just very, very good feedback that I'm going to take into account. And then I wanted to get more specific. And so I asked Claude, what are the major political beliefs in the United States from the far left to the far right of the political spectrum? And it basically said American politics doesn't really follow a linear spectrum. Uh, it doesn't really follow a linear spectrum. That collapsed decades ago. I don't know why. But it essentially gave me a rough ordering of the different families from the left to the right. So on the left of the Democratic Party, you have the anti-capitalist left, which believe that markets are the problem and production should be socially owned. You have the left populist social democratic, i.e., Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They want to keep the markets. They don't want to get rid of the markets. They just want to control them. They want universal health care and education, so on and so forth. And then you also have the progressive liberals who want identity and inclusion, rights expansion, technocratic regulatory approach to markets. At the center, you have the establishment liberals. They want the markets, but they want regulation of the markets and a strong safety net. And they believe in institutionalism and incrementalism. And that is the majority, that is the power center right now of the Democratic Party, which is the Democratic Center. And then you also have the conservative Democrats who are fiscally cautious, culturally moderate, and they represent, they play a function, they are a function of competitive districts. At the center right, you have the traditional fusionist conservatism, believe in free markets, a hawkish foreign policy, social traditionalism, strong constitutionalism. They believe in the Constitution. They've been dominant for the past 40 years. Now they are a minority because Trump took over. You have the libertarians at the center, also economic and social liberty, non-interventionists. Now you have the populist right, and that would be the MAGA movement, which is currently the party's dominant tendency, national conservatism. They believe in trade protection, restrictionist immigration, cultural traditionalism. And they are hostile to institutions and expert authority. And then you also have the religious right, who are anti-abortion. They are for religious liberty, family structure as organizing. They range from evangelical politics to post-liberal intellectuals. And then at the very far right, you have the paleo-conservative, ethno-nationalists, and various anti-democratic currents, including a small neo-reactionary tendency with disproportionate tech sector visibility. So in essence, Claude gave me a very good breakdown of the political spectrum in the U.S. It's very, very, very good stuff. But it made sure to also note that populism is not something that you can categorize into being left or right, because populism runs across the board. That is why anti-monopoly, trade skepticism, and hostility to large tech firms find sympathizers at both ends. So does the diploma divide, which has quietly inverted the class coalitions of both parties. And a large plurality of Americans hold combinations that don't fit anywhere. Okay, cool. Now, the next question that I asked was, is there a way we could unite all the different parties into one system, into one coalition that could actually, and basically the answer was no. The answer was it is possible, but it's not doable. It could last, it wouldn't last a very long time. And the reasons are, the number of reasons. Number one, It's not an information problem. Superintelligence resolves empirical uncertainty, but it doesn't resolve the question of how to trade liberty against equality. Uh, it doesn't resolve the moral question of, for example, does a fetus has a moral status? Those are conflicts of value, and there's no fact whose discovery settles them, right? So it's not about information; it's about the value system. What do you believe in? Um, and you don't want an AI apparently to make that decision, even though we could debate that. Second reason why it wouldn't be a good idea, or it wouldn't be the best way to do it, is that even though the AI might have the correct answer, it wouldn't have necessarily the legitimacy to impose that answer, because it's not about it's about, do people accept your answer. You could say, I have the correct answer. I know what's best for society. If people say we don't want it, well, you can't force them to you can't impose it on them. You would need people to trust the system. So that would be something else that we would need to figure out, how to get people to trust the system. And another reason is interests aren't only beliefs. Interest is not a belief. It's economic, and usually you have winners and losers. So, for example, if you have rent control produces a winner and a loser. So, if you have rent control, the the landlord loses money and the tenant doesn't lose. So you have a winner and a loser. So that's not something that AI could necessarily fix. Here's the good part. The good part is that Claude actually gave me some good feedback and actually told me what could actually survive in my proposal and my analysis. Is that AI would do a very good job at finding the bridging proposals that nobody had drafted. It would find the actual areas where you could have consensus or you could have agreement. In other words, the AI could find the third best option for everyone rather than the first best option for one group of people, right? It's a very valuable strategy that tends to be underexplored. For example, the AI proposes something, and then the humans ratify that proposition, and the ratification makes it binding. So the AI would then decide for people. It would propose these very good ideas, and the people would then decide if they want it or not. And then something else that I mentioned was that whatever the AI proposed, whatever major program or policy, would not be a homogeneous program. It would be something based on subsidiarity, federalism, having different views that coexist. And that's how it would actually work under a pluralist system where different parties are making the decisions together. And the AI would help design um, uh, sort of a program where there are irreconcilable differences, and something like that could actually work. So it turns out that my solution to the AI political alignment was too presumptuous. I sort of like believe that I had the answers to everything, but there are actual people out there who've been thinking about these things. But the AI gave me very, very, very good feedback, and I'm gonna continue thinking about this. What it calls the categorization scheme, meaning you have to know why people oppose something, because the opposition means that the solution that they want would be different. Just because different people oppose something doesn't mean they agree on the actual solution. And then the intensity of an issue matters more than how many people. Well, not necessarily more, but it matters just as much how many. It matters just as much than how many people actually uh, care about that thing. So, for example, the right to privacy. Even if only 20% of people care about the right to privacy, wouldn't necessarily mean that you would get rid of that if that 20% of people genuinely care for that and they were willing to die for that, right? So just because there's a minority of people who believe in something doesn't mean you can get rid of it if that minority strongly, strongly believe in that thing. So that was very, very good feedback from Claude. And then also The data is not always reliable, especially on the internet, obviously. People can manufacture discourse, they can use bots, they can astroturf, they can, there's all kinds of things that people can do to manipulate the data online. And so the AI would have to be super careful about differentiating between genuine, honest data and fake data. What else? All right, that's been very, very good so far. I'm probably gonna make a follow up on this. But yeah, the AI political issue is not solved yet, but there seems to be actual solutions. So we'll do a follow up.